The protagonist of our story is a young man living a miserable life, poor, drowning in debt, and a total coward. But everything changes when he receives his awakening and gains the summoning skill. On his very first attempt, he summons an insane and extremely powerful killer from another dimension. Not only that, but this killer obeys his commands blindly. How will this power transform our hero's life, and what obstacles will he face? That is what we will find out in today's story. The story begins with a young man named Bong Jo-hyuk walking alone in a dark and dirty alley. While two men were sitting on the stairs, one of them spat so his spray landed on the other's foot. Then they burst into laughter and mockery as they plotted to do something. Jo-hyuk continued walking, indifferent to them, thinking about the nature of this neighborhood full of studios, which is noisy and dirty day and night. He went up to his small rooftop home, a humble dwelling no larger than 180 square feet. There, his identity was revealed. Bong Jo-hyuk, a 25-year-old young man, officially unemployed, but struggling by balancing 3 part-time jobs to secure his sustenance, thinking he would settle for a bowl of ramen for dinner again. The reason behind his inability to save any money, despite his hard work, is simple and painful, which is due to the debts burdening him that he must repay no matter how miserable his life is. While he was eating, he contemplated his miserable life. He possessed no special skills other than his body to work with and saw no bright future awaiting him, just a marginal and ordinary life. Suddenly, while he was eating, a glowing blue screen appeared before him, bearing a message stating that Bong Jo-hyuk has awakened. Out of shock, he spat the hot food from his mouth, screaming in pain and surprise, terrified by the screen that appeared out of nowhere. After his initial astonishment subsided, he wondered in confusion if he was the one intended by this mysterious awakening. Awakening was known to be a blessing and a rare opportunity to completely change one's life. Some even consider it better than winning the lottery. However, this opportunity is fraught with danger, as it can only be enjoyed by staying alive, since entering the tower is an extremely dangerous adventure. There, one might get torn apart by a monster, or freeze to death, or burn in harsh climatic conditions, or even die by poisoning or being crushed in a deadly trap, among other horrific ways to end one's life. Jo-hyuk was a cautious person who avoided risks by nature. He ignored injustice and pretended to be busy to avoid dangerous situations. He had lived his life as an ordinary and marginal person for 25 years, avoiding even walking under construction sites. For this reason, he went back to doubting the reality of what happened, wondering if it was just a dream resulting from his extreme exhaustion. To remove all doubt, he decided to test the matter himself and shouted, asking for the status window to appear. Indeed, a window appeared before him displaying his information, his name, his affiliation with the Black Tower, his level being 1, his special trait summoning, in addition to his skills. Jo-hyuk realized then that it was real and not a dream, and that his distinct ability was summoning. It was known that every awakened receives a unique trait, ranging from martial arts like archery and swordsmanship to supernatural abilities like gigantification, healing, and summoning. The summoning trait includes the ability to command different types of creatures, such as spirits, demonic beasts, golems, and others. Driven by excitement, Jo-hyuk wondered what kind of summoner he would be, and decided to try one of his skills immediately. He extended his hand and shouted, "Skill summon!" determined to activate his new ability. But nothing happened, leaving him confused and bewildered, wondering if he had to use the command random summon. Then he quickly remembered with embarrassment that skills cannot be activated outside the tower. The rule states that players' abilities only work inside the tower, and in the outside world, they are no different from any ordinary person, except for their ability to see their own status window. Jo-hyuk felt stupid for forgetting this obvious piece of information that anyone who uses the internet knows. While he was blaming himself for his naive thinking, believing it impossible to activate a skill in his room, a sudden system message appeared announcing the start of a random summon, causing his eyes to widen in astonishment. Before he could comprehend the shock, a glowing purple energy materialized, full of power, completely filling his small room. From the glowing energy, a majestic figure emerged, surrounded by an aura of violet energy. Signs of astonishment and shock were painted on Jo-hyuk's face, wondering how the skill worked in the first place, and worse, how he summoned a human being. With a confident smile, the summoned man saluted and confirmed he was human, while Jo-hyuk remained stunned, disbelieving what was happening. Jo-hyuk was still trying to grasp the situation. He had succeeded in summoning a being outside the tower, and this being was not a spirit or a golem, but a real human. The summoned man soon noticed the delicious smell of ramen filling the room, and with obvious enthusiasm, asked if he could have a bite. Joe Hayek agreed reluctantly, and the man began devouring the ramen with great happiness, while Joe Hayek thought about his bad luck that made him summon a hungry intruder. As the man devoured the food, he began groaning from the heat of the spices, thinking it was a new spicy variety, provoking Joe Hayek's mockery, who realized his guest couldn't handle even mild flavors. Joe Hayek went back to thinking about his original confusion, finding the whole matter puzzling. How could a skill activate outside the tower? And how did he summon a human, something he had never heard of before? He called up the status window again seeking answers, which explained that his ability allows him to summon humans and demi-humans, and that there are varying degrees of rarity starting from rare, R, up to legendary super rare, LSSR, with seamless communication between them. This classification system was like pulling characters in video games, which Joe Hayek realized immediately. Another message appeared, telling him that the summoned being is subject to 3 commandments, sparking his curiosity to know what they were. The 3 commandments were, first, protecting the summoner's life above all else, second, obeying the summoner's orders blindly, and third, in case of a conflict between the 2 commandments, priority is given to the first. While Joe Hayek was thinking that the condition of blind obedience sounded good, wondering about this man's identity, the latter had finished the bowl of ramen completely. The catalog window appeared to reveal the man's identity. He is John Kozak, the Mad Killer of the Ruthlessness Guild, with a super rare, SR rarity, and can stay for 6 hours before needing 3 hours of rest after being recalled. More information flowed into Joe Hayek's mind, explaining that Kozak was a crazy person and a major nuisance to his guild, but in return, he possessed an amazing success rate in his missions reaching 99%. Joe Hayek felt a sharp pain in his head with the sudden influx of information, learning that Kozak had even succeeded in assassinating a dark mage of the 5th Circle, but his final moments were... Joe Hayek entered a sudden vision, feeling like he was falling from a great height. He was seeing through Kozak's eyes as he rushed forward, speeding. In the midst of the vision, Kozak passed by Joe Hayek's spirit, which was watching the scene, surprising him. Joe Hayek realized he wasn't watching a mere vision, but Kozak's real past, where he was rushing towards enemies. The vision displayed Kozak's superior fighting skill, moving like a tornado among his opponents, cutting them down with deadly proficiency. But the scene took a strange turn when he saw Kozak smiling while tying gift ribbons on the severed heads of his victims. And here Joe Hayek understood why he was described as mad. Kozak seemed happy with what he did, as if those heads were indeed gifts, confirming his eccentricity. The vision shifted to his tragic end, which was the result of just one failure, where the assassination target was sleeping in his palace. His final target was the strongest swordsman in the Empire. Joe Hayek watched Kozak's last memory, the moment of his defeat and death at the hands of that swordsman. Suddenly, the vision cut off, and Joe Hayek returned to reality to find Kozak right behind him, asking quietly what he was thinking about so deeply. Joe Hayek jumped from his place in fright, so Kozak apologized immediately, explaining he only wanted to know if he had any orders. Joe Hayek tried to calm himself, remembering the commandment of blind obedience that guarantees his control over this dangerous killer. After gathering his courage, he decided to test this obedience, ordering Kozak to remove the ramen bowl and wipe the table, to which Kozak responded immediately with great enthusiasm, executing orders without hesitation. Joe Hayek noticed with amazement the speed at which Kozak worked and how he didn't utter a single complaint. He was carrying out literally everything asked of him, impressing and surprising Joe Hayek at the same time. As Kozak continued wiping the table diligently, Joe Hayek asked him if strange requests were excluded, and Kozak confirmed that he obeys his summoner's orders unconditionally. To test the limits of this absolute obedience, Joe Hayek hesitantly ordered him to bark. Kozak closed his eyes for a moment, preparing to execute the humiliating order to act like a dog. Joe Hayek felt regret immediately, thinking he might have crossed the line with this powerful killer. While Joe Hayek feared a violent reaction from a man whose pride must be great, Kozak surprised him by starting to bark and frolic enthusiastically like a real dog. Only then was Joe Hayek completely sure that what he possessed was indeed blind obedience. This strange scene was interrupted by violent knocking on the door, and a man's voice calling Joe Hayek, demanding he open up immediately, confusing Kozak. Joe Hayek panicked, suddenly remembering it was the day the interest on his burdensome loan was due. Amidst the continuous knocking, Joe Hayek ordered Kozak to get up hurriedly. In the past, he had been forced to borrow 10 million won from a loan shark after banks refused to lend to him. He desperately needed money for his father's surgery after he broke his hip, in addition to his younger brother's tuition fees. He had no other choice, and although he paid back more than 5 million won in interest, the principal remained the same. Despite realizing the danger of his decision, he believed he would make the same choice if time went back for the sake of his family. While the creditor was at the door trying to appear friendly to check on him, Jo Hyuk called out to Kozak. Kozak's reaction was immediate and terrifying. He drew his dagger with a scary smile, offering Jo Hyuk to cut off the man's head and bring it to him, and Jo Hyuk realized his presence would lead to a disaster. Jo Hyuk acted quickly, pushing Kozak into the bathroom and ordering him to hide and remain completely silent, to which Kozak complied literally, even asking if he was allowed to breathe. After Jo Hyuk opened the door, the loan shark grabbed him, pretending to be concerned, but Jo Hyuk apologized for his delay and sent the due amount immediately. Then the loan shark's talk turned into a veiled threat, suggesting he sell one of his kidneys if things were difficult. When one of his henchmen pointed out that Jo Hyuk's younger brother could be a good source of organs too, Jo Hyuk flew into a rage. The loan shark noticed the look of anger on his face, which provoked him. The loan shark asked him mockingly if he wanted to attack him, so Jo Hyuk remained silent for a moment. But he quickly composed himself and hid his anger with a nervous laugh, confirming he would never do that. The loan shark and his men left after issuing a final threat, leaving Jo Hyuk to breathe a sigh of relief after closing the door. Kozak came out of his hiding place, and when Jo Hyuk praised him for keeping silent, he simply replied that it was his order. Jo Hyuk felt exhausted from the accumulation of the day's stressful events, from hard work, sudden awakening, and the loan shark's visit, and thought about entering the tower as a way to pay off his debts. But he quickly backed away from the idea, believing a coward like him would never survive the dangers of the tower, no matter how tempting the money was. Kozak asked him for the next orders, so Jo Hyuk asked if he wanted to do something, offering to send him back. But Kozak raised his hand enthusiastically and asked with pleasure to watch some TV. Despite Jo Hyuk's confusion about Kozak's knowledge of TV and ramen, he agreed, so Kozak thanked his master and prepared to watch some drama episodes. While Jo Hyuk was asleep, Kozak sat on the floor watching TV intently, immersed in the drama being shown. Despite him being a summoned being, Jo Hyuk found within himself that having someone else nearby wasn't bad, while Kozak smiled quietly, rambling words about avenging his mother. Jo Hyuk woke up for moments, feeling that this presence was comforting. He was used to loneliness and working to death, and meanwhile, Kozak's body began to fade into a bright light as his summoning period ended. The next morning, Jo Hyuk woke up to his phone alarm at 8 a.m., wondering if Kozak had really disappeared. Moments later, a system window appeared confirming John Kozak released, so he realized the 6-hour period had elapsed, and he might have seen the notification while sleeping. Jo Hyuk decided to put the awakening matter aside for now and get ready to go to work, while the breaking news began on TV. As he got ready, the news reported a gruesome murder early that morning at the offices of an illegal lending company called Smile Cash. Jo Hyuk stopped suddenly, as the name Smile Cash was the same name as the loan shark company that visited him yesterday. His shock increased when the announcer announced finding 3 victims, all decapitated, causing him to drop his toothbrush in a state of stupor. But the real shock was in the following details, where the victims' heads were found wrapped in red ribbons, the same method he saw in his vision of Kozak's past. At that moment, Jo Hyuk connected all the dots, realizing with horror that the one who did this was John Kozak. Jo Hyuk had a panic attack, clutching his head, screaming in silence, realizing he hadn't summoned a mere companion, but a mentally unstable killer. The news showed images from the horrific crime scene, which was full of blood and chaos. Then it showed close-ups of the blood-stained hand and the 3 severed heads, each decorated with an elegant red ribbon. Jo Hyuk felt terrified, repeating to himself that his fate was sealed, trembling at the horror of what he discovered. At his job at the convenience store, Jo Hyuk was still in shock, browsing news on his phone to confirm what happened, before a customer interrupted him. Out of extreme fear, he imagined the customer was a headless person putting the loan shark's head on the table, demanding to pay the bill. His terrifying hallucinations continued, imagining the customer asking why he wasn't serving him, while Valentine's Day decorations filled the place. Jo Hyuk screamed in terror, returning to reality to realize it was just a hallucination. Jo Hyuk apologized to the real female customer, who asked him worriedly if he was okay, and promised to serve her immediately. After work, he decided he couldn't work in this mental state, and that he would take a leave from all his jobs the next day. Walking alone in the street, he began to feel guilty, wondering if he was responsible for the death of those people. He returned home and opened the catalog window again, reading Kozak's information to confirm his identity as a mad killer. He tried to calm himself that Kozak wouldn't hurt him because he was his summoner, but fear continued to control him. Finally, he made a decisive decision and extended his hand, using the specified summon skill to call John Kozak again. But before the summoning was complete, a window appeared asking him to first leave a satisfaction rating for John Kozak. Joe Hyok realized this was the satisfaction rating mentioned in the catalog, and 5 empty stars appeared for him to rate. He felt intense anger at Kozak's audacity, whom he ordered to watch TV, so he went and committed murder, and thought about giving him only 1 star because he caused all this terror to a simple citizen like him. But in the end, he couldn't be cruel, so he extended his finger to give Kozak the rating. A system window appeared announcing that John Kozak's satisfaction rating was set at only 3 stars. Joe Hyok immediately remembered his mother's job as a water purifier coordinator and how she used to be sad about low ratings. And because of this memory, he couldn't give Kozak 1 star, even if he had complaints. After completing the evaluation, Kozak appeared again with the same enthusiasm, saluting and welcoming him. Then Kozak thanked his master warmly for the 3 stars, promising to work harder next time, making Joe Hyok doubt this person's innocence and whether it was plausible that he killed 3 men with such brutality. Joe Hyok gathered his courage and asked him directly if he was the one who killed the men who visited him the previous night. Kozak admitted calmly and simply that he had taken care of them last night, before his summon was cancelled, confirming Joe Hyok's suspicions and shocking him. Joe Hyok suddenly realized he was standing face to face with a real killer, feeling nauseous and his heart racing. He tried to calm his nerves, reminding himself that he was safe and Kozak wouldn't hurt him. Then he asked how he managed to find their offices. So Kozak explained that he planted a stalking mark on one of them when they broke into his house, enabling him to track them. Joe Hyok wondered about the nature of this mark and if it was a skill, and more importantly, why he undertook such an action. Kozak replied that they constituted a threat factor, and it was better to deal with them in advance, angering Joe Hyok, who hadn't ordered him to do so. Kozak explained that his action was under the 3rd law of the 3 summon laws. Kozak explained that the laws dictate priority to protecting the summoner, then absolute obedience, and in case of conflict, obedience is ignored in favor of protection. For clarification, Joe Hyok asked if he would disobey his order if he ordered him to kill him, and Kozak confirmed that was correct. Joe Hyok argued there was no real threat, and Kozak's judgment was arbitrary, which Kozak agreed with, admitting the 3rd law could be interpreted broadly. But he insisted his decision was correct, considering those men would pose an inevitable danger to his master's life in the future, so Joe Hyok screamed in frustration, calling him a psychopath. Joe Hyok apologized immediately, but Kozak didn't seem affected, noting he was used to hearing such words. Joe Hyok realized the gravity of the situation. Although he understood Kozak's logic, that logic itself was extremely dangerous. Joe Hyok imagined a scenario walking with Kozak in a crowded street and bumping into someone. That person might direct a verbal threat at him, which is a common occurrence carrying no real intent of harm. But according to Kozak's interpretation, that person might end up headless and decorated with a gift ribbon. Joe Hyok realized the necessity of setting clear boundaries, so he frowned at Kozak, thinking about how to deal with him. Suddenly, Kozak knelt on his knees, apologizing and admitting his mistake, surprising Joe Hyok, who demanded he get up. Joe Hyok began trying to set strict rules, explaining that killing wasn't in his interest and could get him in trouble, but Kozak interrupted him, saying no one would know, and he couldn't guarantee it wouldn't happen again. Joe Hyok insisted Kozak promise not to kill anyone based on mere speculation, unless there was a real and direct danger to his life, so Kozak agreed enthusiastically. Joe Hyok felt satisfied with his response and ordered him to return for the time being. But before leaving, Kozak asked him hesitantly if he didn't intend to climb the tower. This question provoked Joe Hyok's thinking again. He realized climbing the tower was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but deep down he was afraid of the dangers and potential death lurking there. Out of curiosity, Joe Hyok asked Kozak if he had another summoner in his previous life. Kozak answered with a nostalgic smile, confirming the existence of a previous summoner, describing him as truly strong and brave. Joe Hyok felt ashamed of himself. While some use their abilities to save the world, he lacked the courage to risk his life. Joe Hyok admitted to himself he was cowardly and pathetic, something he knew well. But Kozak's reaction was completely unexpected, exploding with enthusiasm, declaring Joe Hyok the best summoner ever, totally astounding the latter. Kozak grabbed Joe Hyok's shoulders firmly, asserting that the greatest virtue of a summoner is safety first. He continued enthusiastically that courage is poison, and a brave summoner is in constant danger, because if the summoner dies, the summoned cannot come out again. Then he reassured him that he would handle all dangerous and dirty tasks on his behalf, and simply asked him to live a safe and long life, deeply affecting Joe Hyok. That night, Joe Hyok slept fitfully, thinking hard about the decision to climb the tower. In the morning, he had made up his mind, deciding such a life wasn't for him, and he would be content living thankfully for getting rid of the loan sharks and their debts. He went out to his roof, determined to continue his normal and safe work, believing things would improve with time if he lived diligently. But suddenly, he felt a sharp and sudden pain in his side, then heard his phone ring. He received a call from his father telling him he needed to be transferred to a bigger hospital. Then he received another shock, as his father told him his mother had been fired from her job. Joe Hyok ended the call after promising to visit them soon, feeling all his hopes crumbling. In that moment of despair, he made his final decision, wearing a safety helmet and safety vest, carrying a warning sign and a bat, ready to enter the tower. He decided to take a quick look at the first floor only, with a plan to escape immediately if he felt danger, taking advantage of being on leave from all his jobs. But before he started, he thought he didn't have to rely on the crazy Kozak. He wondered if he could summon someone else, and perhaps get lucky and get a legendary rare being. But his hopes were dashed when a system window appeared telling him random summon is currently unavailable, and he must wait for about a month. In the end, he had no choice but to summon Kozak, who appeared enthusiastically thanking him for his rating, ready to receive orders. Joe Hyok felt embarrassed, hoping Kozak hadn't realized his attempt to summon someone else. Joe Hyok announced his decision to enter the tower, and Kozak rejoiced at his courage, but Joe Hyok quickly backtracked, confirming it was just a quick reconnaissance tour. Kozak praised his wisdom, then took his primitive tools, announcing he would be his master's tool and hunting dog. He promised him a comfortable and safe journey, asking him not to lift a finger once they entered. A system window appeared, asking if he wished to enter the Korean Black Tower, and after agreeing, both began to enter. They were pulled inside the tower through a glowing digital tunnel, while Joe Hyok screamed in fear and surprise. The terrifying fall through digital space continued. Finally, they reached their destination, finding themselves inside the Black Tower, within a hexagonal energy barrier in a barren area. Joe Hyok found the first floor of the tower to be completely barren land, a desolate and lonely place. Joe Hyok suffered from nausea and severe dizziness due to the sudden and unfamiliar transition. While he was vomiting, Kozak asked him worriedly if he was okay, then reassured him he would get used to it soon. After Joe Hyok regained his balance, Kozak led him out of the safety zone to embark on their mission. Once inside the tower, system windows appeared telling him his physical abilities had improved according to his level, and his traits and combat skills became available for use. Joe Hyok felt power flowing through his body, and finally realized what it meant to be a player. Although at level 1, he felt noticeable strength. Another window appeared displaying details of the first floor mission, which required him to defeat 5 thick-skinned fat larvae within 2 hours. The first floor was known as a place to test basic skills, and these larvae were like training scarecrows, weak in attack, but with very tough skin. Joe Hyok remembered through his internet research that the best players took about 30 minutes to eliminate one larva. But now he had become a player too, and felt excited to test his strength. He decided to try eliminating one himself, while Kozak watched him anxiously, wondering why he insisted on putting himself in trouble. Joe Hyok stood in front of one of the giant larvae, ready for confrontation. When he bent down to take a weapon from Kozak, the larva attacked him suddenly. The larva opened its mouth to devour him, but Joe Hyok froze in place from fear. In a moment of despair, he asked Kozak for help. Kozak praised his wise decision to rely on him. In the blink of an eye, Kozak dashed towards the larva with amazing speed. With a single blow, he eliminated the larva that was threatening Joe Hyok. Then he asked Joe Hyok to step back for moments, rushing towards the rest of the larvae. With a quick movement, he threw his daggers towards the larvae flying in the air. Kozak released the blade explosion skill, causing the daggers to detonate and eliminate all the larvae. The larvae exploded in a barrage of blue energy. Joe Hyok stood stunned as Kozak managed to eliminate difficult targets in a single moment. Immediately, system windows appeared announcing his success in the mission, his level up, receiving a reward, plus a special notification of achieving S++ rank in clearing the floor, granting him a platinum badge as an extra bonus. Joe Hyok felt overjoyed at how easy it was and began dreaming of the wealth he might amass. But he didn't know that what he did had caused a huge stir, as another female player received a notification of what happened. At that very moment, the same notification appeared for another player checking the system screen. The notification reached every player in South Korea at the same time, announcing the unprecedented achievement. After finishing the mission, Joe Hyok was given a choice between challenging the second floor or exiting the tower, so he chose to exit. He returned home immediately, shocked that this whole adventure took only 5 minutes. Kozak congratulated his master Joe Hyok on the good work he did. Joe Hyok told him he did nothing but stand still, so Kozak assured him that was the correct action. While Joe Hyok thought the mission was much easier than he heard. Joe Hayek found before him the two rewards he received, a glowing blue magic stone and a silver platinum badge. The magic stone was an important industrial resource, and despite its price drop compared to the early days of the towers, it was still worth about 50,000 won per 100 grams. 20 years had passed since the appearance of black towers all over the world, and most people had general knowledge of them thanks to the spread of information on the internet. But the platinum badge was something completely mysterious. Joe Hayek had never heard of it before. Ignoring the badge matter temporarily, Joe Hayek celebrated earning 50,000 won in just 3 minutes, and Kozak prepared to watch drama. But Joe Hayek stopped him and invited him to eat with him, ordering a meal of jokbal, pig's trotters. Kozak began sniffing the air anxiously, wondering if the meal was spicy. Joe Hayek reassured him he ordered the regular version, knowing Kozak couldn't handle spicy food, confirming to Joe Hayek that Kozak's spice tolerance was absolutely zero. Kozak thanked his master enthusiastically and began eating, confusing Joe Hayek with his use of informal language. Kozak explained his way of speaking was influenced by his previous summoner with whom he spent a long time. Joe Hayek likened it to the influence of an ex-boyfriend, but in this case, it was the influence of an ex-summoner. Kozak offered to change his way of speaking if it annoyed him, but Joe Hayek told him he found it amusing, so they both laughed. While enjoying his meal, Joe Hayek became completely sure that the tower wasn't dangerous at all. On the contrary, he found it completely doable for him. The next morning, Joe Hayek set a new daily schedule for himself. He decided to quit his day labor job, satisfied with working at the convenience store by day and the restaurant by night, dedicating the time in between to climbing the tower with Kozak. When he summoned Kozak again, the latter was so happy with his new rating, 5 stars again, that he started dancing. Joe Hayek wondered about the importance of this satisfaction rating. Kozak explained that better ratings bring more benefits, like increased duration, rank elevation, and increased chance of receiving summons. Immediately after that, they entered the second floor of the tower. The second floor mission was to defeat 10 quick-witted fat larvae. These larvae were much faster than Joe Hayek expected, making him realize the difficulty of the mission. He wondered what he should do, but Kozak told him there would be no time to do anything, and promised to finish the mission within just 3 minutes. While he was preparing to launch and finishing the mission quickly to return home, Joe Hayek asked him enthusiastically if they would have chicken after finishing the mission. Kozak set off happily, thanking his master for this offer, and began eliminating the fast larvae with amazing skill, making Joe Hayek realize the craziness of the situation. Once again, Joe Hayek succeeded in the second floor mission with the same ease, leveling up and receiving double rewards, plus another notification of achieving S++ rank and a new platinum badge. Joe Hayek couldn't believe how easy and fast it was. He was able to finish a whole floor in a very short time. He could even do it before going to his morning job. They entered the third floor. Its mission was to defeat 10 icy fat larvae, and Kozak noticed Joe Hayek's landing skill had improved. As happened in previous floors, the mission was accomplished lightning fast and Joe Hayek got rewards, a level promotion, and another notification of achieving S++ rank. This pattern continued. On the fourth floor, where he got another platinum badge, and the fifth, where he and Kozak were working in perfect harmony. After finishing the fifth floor, a new notification appeared stating he had collected 5 S++ platinum badges and would receive a special perk as a reward for this achievement. This special perk was Awakening Trait Enhancement, resulting in an increase in the number of concurrent summons he could perform to 2. Joe Hayek checked his status window to find his level had reached 6, and the concurrent summon slot had indeed changed to 2. Joe Hayek realized the massive potential of this upgrade. If Kozak alone could crush everything, what would happen if he had another person of equal strength by his side? The reward for achieving S++ rank was much better than he imagined. Joe Hayek felt this would make his future battles safer. He decided to wait patiently for the random summon cooldown to end, which is over 20 days, and planned to continue climbing floors with Kozak meanwhile, and after the cooldown ends, the three of them would advance together. Meanwhile, at the Awakened Management Department in Seoul, there was anticipation and anxiety. One official was wondering anxiously when the next notification would appear. His colleague noticed he was thinking about the announcement they were waiting for. Their identities were revealed. Jun Gwang-il, team leader of Awakened Management, and Lee Min-ah, deputy manager, who was enjoying piquing his curiosity. Min-ah told him a new announcement had already appeared about clearing the 6th floor of the Korean Black Tower with S++ rank. The Black Tower global announcements had been ringing frequently lately, all bearing news of clearing floors with S++ rank from the 1st to the 5th floor, confirming to them that one person was doing it. This player possessed unprecedented and overwhelming talent. They wondered if he would continue achieving the same rank on higher floors, in which case, it would be a historic discovery, as the highest record in Korea was rank A. They realized the gravity of the situation. In today's world, naturalizing strong players had become common, even secret kidnappings occurred, so they had to find this player before another country beat them to it. Department Director Park Gyeong-soo issued orders to find this player immediately and monitor every new registered player closely. 2 days later, Jo Hyuk and Kozak were preparing to enter the 8th floor, clearing one floor every day effortlessly. Jo Hyuk was feeling satisfied, as everything was going smoothly, especially since the first 10 floors are considered a beginner zone. The 8th floor mission was to defeat 10 red thorn frog warriors in a misty forest. The giant frogs appeared and attacked with their long, sticky tongues. But Kozak was faster and stronger, easily countering attacks and eliminating warriors proficiently. As usual, he finished the mission quickly, and Jo Hyuk got a promotion, rewards, and a new notification of achieving S++ rank and another platinum badge. After returning from the tower, Kozak congratulated his master on the good work, but Jo Hyuk felt guilty for doing nothing, so Kozak told him simply entering the tower is the hardest part. Jo Hyuk felt grateful to Kozak, who always made climbing floors easy, and thought about giving him a gift as a reward, but remembered Kozak's warning that upcoming floors would be harder. Jo Hyuk decided to reward Kozak by giving him some money to go out and enjoy his remaining time, advising him not to cause trouble. But Kozak rejected the offer flatly, insisting he couldn't leave his master and would settle for watching TV, puzzling Jo Hyuk about this not falling under the blind obedience law. Jo Hyuk suggested ordering chicken instead, which Kozak met with great enthusiasm. While Kozak waited for the non-spicy chicken he ordered, Jo Hyuk decided to inspect the rewards he received. The new reward was an exclusive tower healing potion, and he decided immediately it would be for Kozak. As for magic stones, he had collected a total of 3.6 kilograms, estimated at about 1.8 million won, making him seriously consider cashing them out. With 10 days past since his climbing, Jo Hyuk had reached the 10th floor, thinking about quitting his part-time job after it all started as a simple experiment. Missions were easy for Kozak, rewards guaranteed, and S++ badges just an extra bonus. Jo Hyuk felt overwhelming happiness and incredible reassurance, to the point he almost forgot Kozak was a mad killer. When he summoned Kozak again, the system window surprised him that continuous satisfaction ratings granted a new reward, increasing Kozak's stay duration by an extra hour. Kozak thanked his master enthusiastically for this reward, promising to handle everything for him. They entered the 10th floor, and Jo Hyuk felt power flowing in his body noticeably more than ever. The recalibration of physical abilities inside the tower was crystal clear now, as he felt immense power and mysterious energy, mana, in his body. Jo Hyuk felt like an untamable wild horse. He told Kozak enthusiastically he would help him fight from now on. But Kozak rejected the idea strongly, asserting that a mere scratch on his master would drive him to smash his head into the ground, and that encouraging and praising him was enough. Jo Hyuk insisted on fighting together this time. But he fell silent suddenly when he saw what was before them. It was the 10th floor monster, a giant and terrifying praying mantis. Jo Hyuk wondered in horror how other players managed to kill something like this. Jo Hyuk felt insulted that two people had to face just an insect, Kozak replied. There was nothing insulting about it, but Jo Hyuk assured him his pride was hurt, not Kozak's. After Jo Hyuk encouraged him, Kozak set off to face the monster. Kozak stood before the giant praying mantis with confidence, and began dodging its fast and deadly attacks with amazing skill. In the end, he finished it off with a lightning strike, for the system to announce his mission success, promotion, and obtaining an extra kilogram of magic stones. Once again, he received an S++ rank notification and a platinum badge. After exiting the tower, his total magic stone possession became 5.5 kilograms. And because he had already received a special perk at 5 badges, he didn't expect anything new. After collecting 10 platinum badges, Jo Hyuk obtained a new special perk that sparked his excitement and curiosity. The new perk was the ability to copy one skill possessed by a summoned being, and he was presented with a list of Kozak's skills, such as Blade Explosion, Shadow Step, and Stealth. Kozak interrupted him firmly, advising him to choose the Shadow Step skill without hesitation. Kozak explained that this skill is very useful for escaping, as it enables him to move quickly and quietly in dangerous situations. Jo Hyuk felt insulted, wondering if Kozak saw him as someone who only thinks about escaping and saving his own skin. However, he ignored his feelings and chose the Shadow Step skill, obtaining it immediately as it registered in his status window. Kozak began to explain the importance of quick footwork in combat, which Jo Hyuk tried to believe. When Jo Hyuk tried to test the new skill in his home, he failed miserably and fell to the floor. As Jo Hyuk writhed in pain, Kozak commented that his deduction was correct. Skills do not work outside the tower, although the summoning skill itself was a strange exception. On the 11th day of his climb, Jo Hyuk gathered his courage and contacted the Awakened Management Center. He introduced himself shyly as Bong Jo Hyuk and informed them that he had awakened. The female employee welcomed him warmly, congratulated him, and offered to send a government support team to assist him. He agreed and gave them his address. This decision was the bravest he had ever made in his life, as he had finally decided to sell the magic stones he had collected. Meanwhile, Deputy Director Lee Min-ah arrived at the management headquarters, where team leader Jun Gwang-il was waiting for her, and she informed him that the awakened they met yesterday was not the record holder. Min-ah told him there was a new awakening request and invited him to accompany her. He agreed immediately, realizing the importance of moving quickly. Gwang-il was determined to recruit the record holder into the elite team, no matter the cost. Jo Hyuk prepared for the visit by carefully cleaning his small apartment. When he heard a knock on the door, he realized they had arrived. Jo Hyuk opened the door and welcomed Gwang-il and Min-ah into his home. Gwang-il introduced him to Min-ah, explaining that she was also a player and he could ask her anything, which increased Jo Hyuk's nervousness. Min-ah suddenly leaned in very close to him, confusing him and making his heart race. With a piercing gaze, she whispered in his face, asking if he was the one behind the S++ achievement. Jo Hyuk screamed out of sheer shock and surprise. He wondered in panic how she managed to know that, and if there was a special way to detect the identity of the awakened. He decided on the spot to deny it and act naturally. But his performance was terrible, as he denied it in a stiff and suspicious manner. Min-ah immediately realized he was lying, for his body language was as clear as an open book. Gwang-il interrupted her, scolding her for her interrogation style, and she promised to be more careful. Min-ah apologized to Jo Hyuk, who realized she was just testing him. Then, a cute cartoon character named Tabby, the mascot of the Korean Black Tower, appeared to begin explaining the basics of the tower. Tabby continued her explanation about the Black Tower, that massive and ominous structure that had suddenly appeared all over the world 20 years ago. Every country tried to explore these towers with their military and scientific forces, but they failed to get close due to an invisible barrier preventing access. The nature of the tower was only revealed with the emergence of players, as it turned out to be a game-like structure requiring players to climb it floor by floor. Although players look like ordinary people outside the tower, they gain supernatural abilities and skills inside it, using the rewards they obtain to upgrade their equipment and contribute to the global economy. Tabby posed an important question. What happens if the tower is not climbed? She explained that when players' progress slows down in a country's tower, a countdown to collapse is activated. This countdown only stops when new progress is made, but if 6 months pass without clearing a new floor, the countdown begins. Eventually, the tower collapses, which is what actually happened 3 years ago, leading to the disappearance of the city of Mumbai in India. Tabby explained that every country possesses between 1 to 3 towers, and South Korea is lucky to have only one. Also, the number of players is very small compared to the population. However, Korea's progress in climbing the tower is going well, as they rank second globally after the United States. Tabby emphasized, there is no need to worry with these heroes exploring the tower, just as their ancestors explored new continents. Then she addressed the new awakened, considering them the hope of the era, and urged them to register as official players to become heroes as well. After the presentation ended, Gwang-il told Jo Hyuk he would ask him some questions to verify his identity. While Jo Hyuk thought about the absurdity of this method, Gwang-il asked him if he was truly awakened, so Jo Hyuk confirmed it, and showed them the magic stones he had collected as proof, then revealed that he had reached the 10th floor. Both Gwang-il and Min-ah were shocked, as this was the exact same floor reached by the S++ record holder. Min-ah looked at him suspiciously, wondering if he was the person they were looking for. Min-ah asked him directly if he had heard about the recent global notification. Jo Hyuk pretended to be indifferent, confirming he heard about it and that it seemed like an amazing player, but it wasn't him. But his excessive tension and forced smile made the whole thing extremely suspicious. Gwang-il began to explain the contract terms, clarifying that the government manages players by dividing them into 2 teams, the elite team and the general team. The general team works independently like freelancers, while the elite team maintains a close relationship with the awakened management. The elite team receives various support and benefits in exchange for their obligations, including personal protection outside the tower, where players revert to being ordinary people. Additionally, elite team members receive a basic annual salary, which made Joe Hyok think about the consequences if his identity were revealed. Joe Hyok imagined himself surrounded by media and embarrassing questions, something he hated intensely. He would rather die than receive all this attention. Kwang-il explained that to advance to the elite team, footage of raids must be recorded using a special body camera. Joe Hyok interrupted him firmly, declaring that he would not apply for the elite team, which surprised Kwang-il. Joe Hyok insisted that he was satisfied with joining the general team, claiming he didn't possess enough talent. He added with a smile that he preferred to stop at a reasonable floor and get reasonable rewards because the whole thing was scary to him. Kwang-il tried to persuade him to think it over carefully, but Joe Hyok confirmed he had already made his decision. Minna felt disappointed, realizing she had misjudged this time as well. Lee Minna was thinking that there are many players who stop at a certain point and continue hunting safely, but she had never seen someone express their cowardice so frankly during a test, considering him unqualified. She believed that even if he applied for the elite team, he should never be accepted, because the most important quality for the team is the will to climb the tower. Nevertheless, Jun Kwang-il told Joe Hyok that they respected his decision. Then he asked him to enter the tower as a final measure to confirm his awakening. Kwang-il seized the opportunity and suggested Joe Hyok clear a floor mission since the daily entry chance would be wasted anyway, and Joe Hyok realized this was a test to see if he would achieve an S++ rank again. Joe Hyok agreed reluctantly, but claimed he would take the full time for the mission, about 2 hours, to which Kwang-il and Minna agreed. Minna smiled and reassured him not to feel pressured and to take his time. After Joe Hyok asked them to relax and watch TV, he prepared to enter the tower. He opened the entry gate and disappeared inside. Kwang-il asked for Minna's opinion on Joe Hyok after confirming his awakening. Minna replied that she didn't know the extent of his talent, but he seemed extremely cowardly, and his behavior and way of speaking indicated fear. She predicted he would give up on the 11th floor. She explained that she had cleared this floor herself, and that it tests players' fear through the long-tailed tunnel centipede monster, which isn't a difficult monster in itself. But the mission requires killing 100 of them, something a cowardly person couldn't do because of their disgusting appearance. Minna was sure Joe Hyok would return to the safe zone and abandon the mission, a view Kwang-il agreed with, as her predictions had been accurate so far. Kwang-il decided to call the director and inform him that their search had failed again. Inside the tower, Joe Hyok summoned Kozak. Kozak appeared enthusiastically and saluted. The 11th floor mission was to defeat 100 long-tailed tunnel centipedes within 3 hours. Joe Hyok felt disgusted at the thought of facing 100 insects, but Kozak reassured him he would finish it in 5 minutes. Joe Hyok stopped him and ordered him to hunt as slowly as possible for over an hour so that no new record would be set. He told him he was being watched from the outside and that he would unsummon him while still inside the tower, which Kozak understood immediately. Joe Hyok planned to avoid suspicion completely by setting a bad record. But Kozak was still too fast. Joe Hyok shouted at him to move slower. The hunting pace slowed down significantly. Joe Hyok felt satisfied, thinking things would go fine. But suddenly he felt terror. A huge insect appeared from under his feet. He tried to use a skill to escape, but his body froze in place from fear. Kozak noticed the danger threatening his master. In the blink of an eye, Kozak intervened to save him, declaring he would handle it. Kozak was furious that the disgusting insects dared to attack his master and launched a sweeping attack. He began slicing the giant insects into pieces with amazing skill and speed. However, Joe Hyok tried to stop him, realizing his plan to hide his power was about to collapse. He shouted at him to slow down, reminding him that his speed would expose them. He ordered him again to slow the pace of combat as much as possible, but Kozak refused, asserting that his master's life was the top priority. Joe Hyok realized with panic that if Kozak continued with this enthusiasm, they would achieve an S++ rank again, which is exactly what happened. Joe Hyok felt frustrated and cursed, while Kozak apologized for not following orders. After the mission ended, Joe Hyok began to exit the tower. Meanwhile, in Joe Hyok's apartment, Lee Min-ah and Jun Kwang-il were waiting for his return, and only 5 minutes had passed. Suddenly, a system notification appeared before them announcing the achievement of S++ rank on the 11th floor, leaving them stunned. At the same moment, Joe Hyok emerged from the tower gate. Kwang-il and Min-ah couldn't believe what was happening. The moment Joe Hyok appeared, the notification of the unprecedented achievement appeared with him. It was completely clear now. Joe Hyok sighed, realizing he didn't want to be exposed this way. With a sharp look, he announced he would have to silence them. He summoned Kozak behind him, sparking panic in Kwang-il and Min-ah. Jo Hyuk ordered Kozak to restrain them immediately. But what happened next was just a terrifying hallucination from Jo Hyuk's imagination, where he imagined Kozak cutting off their heads. Jo Hyuk screamed in his panic, asking who ordered him to cut off their heads. He imagined their severed heads apologizing to him. Gwang-il's voice brought him back to reality, asking him anxiously if he was okay. Jo Hyuk apologized, realizing he was suffering from persecutory delusions due to stress. Jo Hyuk regained his composure, and Gwang-il told him that the elite team desperately needed a talent like him. Jo Hyuk tried to wiggle out of it again, claiming it was just a coincidence, and another player achieved the feat. But Gwang-il wasn't convinced, pointing out that the timing was too perfect, causing Jo Hyuk to stammer in his denial. Finally, Gwang-il gave up and took out a contract. Jo Hyuk was surprised that the contract was an elite contract, even though he had requested a general one. Gwang-il explained that this contract was from a completely different dimension, and it was the only one of its kind. It was the super elite contract. The contract offered him an annual salary of 12 billion won, in addition to real estate, VIP protocol, and tight security protection. In addition to all previous privileges, the contract granted him immunity privilege, making Jo Hyuk think this placed him almost above the law. This was akin to nobility, a perk only obtained by Korea's #1 player, Yoo Cheol-min. Although the contract combined every benefit the state could offer, Jo Hyuk rejected it. He announced angrily that he wouldn't become a player if the contract wasn't general. When Gwang-il asked him the reason for his vehement refusal, he simply replied that it was because he hates being the center of attention. He explained that he finds attention a burden and psychological pressure, to the point that he avoids shops where the vendors know him. His heart felt heavy at the mere thought of being known. Gwang-il and Min-ah realized that Jo Hyuk was introverted to the extreme. Jo Hyuk justified his decision, saying climbing the tower is fun now, but the future is still unknown, and he isn't sure of his abilities. Gwang-il understood the situation and decided to back down for now, agreeing to a general contract. Jo Hyuk felt relieved, realizing the elite contract came with great responsibilities he didn't want to bear. The elite team is designated for climbing high floors, and its members cannot back down from this commitment. Jo Hyuk refused this burden, content with living more comfortably than before. In the Awakened Management Office, the director was questioning Gwang-il about his report. The director was astonished at how a cowardly player with no will to climb could be the record holder. Gwang-il couldn't understand it either, but noted that the player's personality seemed strange. He was cowardly to a rare degree. When the director asked if it was possible they misidentified the person, Min-ah confirmed that was impossible, as the timing was perfect. The director got angry, declaring that his cowardice didn't matter as long as his talent was exceptional, and ordered him to be added to the elite team at any cost. Gwang-il realized there was no escaping the order. Meanwhile, Jo Hyuk was scolding Kozak for exposing him, threatening to cancel his summon if it happened again. Kozak apologized immediately. After that, they entered the 12th floor, where the mission was to defeat 20 Ice Spear Weasels. Jo Hyuk summoned Kozak and ordered him to move very slowly this time. Jo Hyuk felt confident that Kozak would follow his orders this time, and that his plan to hide his identity would succeed. But as soon as they entered the icy environment, Jo Hyuk began to shiver from the bitter cold. The cold was more severe than he expected, and he tried to endure it. Kozak noticed his master's pale face and asked anxiously if he was okay, promising to finish the mission quickly to take him to a warm place. Jo Hyuk tried to persuade him to slow down, insisting he was fine. But Kozak, in his worry for his master, considered his getting a cold a life-threatening danger, and that a cold is a terminal illness. Thus the summoner's life was at risk. Then he moved with insane speed to eliminate the monsters.